Hello, I'm Meg Kanitzer, and I'm going to show you my experiments of transferring an image from a toner print to a piece of fabric using Citra Solv. This is my first time doing this technique, and so I've definitely had some testing to do. It is really important to use a print from a toner printer because that is what the Citra Solv eats away and then allows the ink to go into the fabric. I had a few pieces of printed paper that didn't work, and so I ran to the library and I printed using their toner printer, and then I also took one of those prints and Xeroxed it to see if there was a difference between like the toners and the printers and whether Xerox would make a difference. The printed paper directly from the printer works better for sure than the Xerox copies. I also had a lot of failures, which is always kind of happens in these kind of processes where you kind of get the feel of like how much you need to burnish, how much Citra Solv you need, what your fabric looks like. Basically for the setup, I have an image that I took of a local landmark. I have a piece of material that is a pretty tight weave. I heard that it's way easier to get an image transfer on really tight weaves like silk, and it's harder on like rougher, more loose fibers. So the first thing I do is I make sure I'm working on a hard board that the Citra Solv won't ruin. And I have a brush and a spoon to burnish and my Citra Solv. I also read someone online thought that ironing it while the image is still on is better for your print. It is really nice to be able to iron it right afterwards because it evaporates the Citra Solv right out of the materials. So it's a definite need, but like when you do it is part of the experimenting. And so what I do is I just have a flat piece of fabric, definitely iron it first so that you don't have any like weaves or creases. I put my image side down and then I just go ahead and apply my Citra Solv to the back. A little bit of Citra Solv goes a really long way, which is quite nice for this project, but it is slightly toxic. So it's okay, just wash your hands like afterwards and work in a well-ventilated area. So I am completely saturating my image with Citra Solv, and you can actually see the image come right through, which helps you kind of have that guideline. I've seen other people pin this down, but I actually think holding it on is just fine. And then right away, I use my back of my spoon to burnish. And I have noticed with my experimenting that burnishing and taking the time to really press like almost as hard as you can, really it helps that ink get transferred into the material. So this actually did take quite a while to press in, and then if you're not getting a good image transfer, I actually put a little bit more Citra Solv and did layers of this process before I took the paper off, and that seemed to help as well. I can see usage for this being really cool for high schoolers to take their own image so they can work with their own photography and then go ahead and put the material, you know, even on an embroidery hoop and sew on top of it after the process of this. I kind of see this as like a step in a bigger process, not just like a final product, because unless you're doing like really intense photography and that's the focus, there's really no reason to put it on material if you just stop there and it's not as authentic. I think they can manipulate this really cool with some embroidery and stitching on top, or working in layers, maybe including a piece of fabric that they've done this to in a collage. There's a lot of applications that they can take this and really make it more interesting and unique by manipulating it. I thought maybe for elementary, it would be cool if you're teaching stitching to make to print off your guidelines so that they could follow like the stitches, basically like drawing guidelines right onto it just for early practice. I think that would be really smart. The other thing I was thinking, if they can sew, but they're struggling with their drawing skills, you could print like very simple cartoons and print them onto fabric and then have students sew onto it. And that way you could have some imagery that they could practice their sewing onto. So that's kind of the applications that I would think about as I'm teaching with this. I'm just gonna peek under and see how it's transferring. Right away, I'm noticing I have lettering that is backwards because I did not flip my image. So that is something I will think about on my final, is if I have lettering, I need to reverse the image, but that's okay. So there, I think it's burnished pretty well, so I'm gonna come in with my iron and go ahead and iron this, and you'll see the Citra Solv dissolve or dry out and evaporate immediately. So it's just nice to know that your fabric doesn't have like a bunch of chemicals in it afterwards. Go. And then I'll go ahead and take that up. So you'll notice I was printing pretty intense contrast. I wanted to make sure that those darks are dark and the lights are lights, just so I can really see it come through, because the image doesn't transfer perfectly. I'll show you how that one did. Just like that. So I think if you want, there's one of my dog. I think this would be a really cool application for high schoolers to show them this technique and then say, now what are you gonna do? Are you gonna paint on it? Are you gonna sew on it? Are you gonna collage with it? Otherwise, for younger students, maybe it is just kind of a guideline or first step. But I think this is a really cool technique. I could totally see myself using it in the classroom. Thanks.